However, I'm not sure that you can hear me. Can I?
We can.
Yes, thank you. Okay. So, however, before we get started, just a reminder that we are recording this session. You will be muted during the first part of the session, and maybe you will be unmuted during the question and answer part. Also, feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation by using the chat window. When the time comes, we'll be sure to revisit any unanswered questions you may have. May I also encourage you to support our work? We rely on donations to do this work, and every gift, even a small one, makes a difference to us. I hope that you will feel moved to go to our website and donate as soon as you can. Now, before I introduce our guest speakers, let me make some introductory remarks to our subject today of polarization, division, and confrontation, and how to move towards cooperation and unity. I have been an English language teacher for 23 years and a member of ISC Lebanon for 20. I have learned that each and every one of us is responsible of and contributes to either building bridges between the divides or widening these divides. My country, Lebanon, is crumbling now. More than 200 people were killed, more than 6,500 people were injured, and 1/3 of this capital was destroyed in last year's blast that is ranked as the most powerful non-nuclear explosion in the 21st century. We have an economic crisis that unprecedented, where people lost their, not only lost their salaries values, but also their life savings. People are fighting over food in the supermarkets, and no one, absolutely no one, has been held accountable yet. How did we hit rock bottom this hard? What led us to this state of living in the shadow of a coming famine? Total electricity power or blackout? Total disconnection from the rest of the world? It's polarization. Yes, our leaders kept feeding the fear in people, widening the divides, and building walls to separate them. Why? To secure their places, to continue leading the corrupt system where they benefit at the expense of people's dignity and well-being. The people of Lebanon failed to see that polarization is leading to their falling. They didn't stand together. They didn't listen. They didn't really overcome their differences and accept their diversity. All this led to losing the basic human rights. The people of Lebanon, in their fight over their religious sects' rights, lost all their basic human rights. With that, and to examine polarization further and learn practical tools to battle it, allow me to introduce to you our first speaker, Amina Khalid. Amina specializes in the sociology of medicine and social policy with a master's in equality and diversity policies. Based in the UK, she's an international trainer in dialogue facilitation, mediation, communication, and conflict resolution. Her work spans over Africa, Asia, Middle East, and Europe. She has been with Initiatives for Change for the last 10 years. Currently, she's the head of program for sustainable communities for the IOFC UK and the trustee for Somali Initiatives for Dialogue and Democracy, as well as the founder of Peace Begins at Home, an international intergenerational dialogue training created to empower and build the bridges between the generations and policymakers. She has a real passion for language arts, poetry, music, and painting. In her role as an international advocate for peace, she uses her language and coaching skills to inspire, equip, and connect individuals and organizations to become positive agents of change. Amina is one strong voice against injustice, segregation, abuse, and dehumanization. She is a passionate lady who built her strength and determination by transforming her own experiences of pain into an armor with which she navigates this world to bring healing, trust, and collaboration to communities. Over to you, Amina, and thank you for being with us today.
Wow, greetings to you all. Salam, may peace be upon all of you. And what a thought-provoking introduction and opening remarks, Ruwaida, you've made. It's an honor to be here with you all. It is an honor that we are addressing this particular topic at a time of much conflict and hostility in the world. And it's also a great pleasure to be here with our distinguished brothers and mentor, Imam Ashafa and Pastor Oye. I'm very pleased to be sharing this virtual platform with you. Today's topic is of significant importance for me, both personally and professionally. I was born in Somalia, a country of extreme political polarization. Naturally, from a young age, I was exposed to the deep division and conflict, which has killed so many lives, including members of my own family. The whole country of Somalia is divided up into clans, with everyone being in a large clan that is divided into a sub-clan and then smaller groups, causing deep-rooted trust deficit and distraction. My family was forced to flee from Somalia and from the civil war and persecution over 20 years ago, leaving everything and everyone behind to seek refuge in what is now my adopted country in Great Britain. As a teenager growing up in Britain, I've experienced and witnessed firsthand conflict and division in families, within communities, and even between countries. I've become very conscious of the impact of these atrocities in my adopted country, but also on the world stage. This has pushed me to come out of my comfort zone and reach out to the other. There's so much othering going on at the moment, as you will all agree. But first, I did that in order to understand where the other was coming from, and secondly, to play a part in remaking the world, as our founder, Frank Buchman, would say. So let us now look and see what that looks like in the context of UK. Next page, please. As the head of Programme of Sustainable Communities that was initiated in 2012, as a result of a strategic approach to the London riot, which has caused not only division and conflict, but atrocities across the country, that had compelled teams from Initiative of Change to focus in addressing the moral and spiritual challenges that communities are facing in order to develop and mobilize and to tackle some of the critical and key issues that we are talking about today. The program's focus is on the three strategic areas of Initiative of Change to create community cohesion: ethical leadership, sustainable living, trust building, and all of which are central to IFC's outreach. Our three clear aims are simple. First is to support community-led actions and create a strong local vision. So many people are in great despair. Secondly is to increase the long-term sustainability of the local community life, which so much of it is now in question. And thirdly is to influence and create policies based on needs rather than fear. We know that there's so much fear going on at the moment. Next, please. So, what are our key drivers of polarization in the UK? Just like many other countries, they're the obvious ones: economic inequality, class inequality, racial inequality, and of course, needless to say, media. Media that has fueled and put so much fire on the fuel for so many years. That is not only creating destruction, division, but to an extreme is leading to killings and suicides. The numbers are going high. Fake media and fake news is one which we're all grappling and struggling to deal with. The question is, how do we collectively respond to some of these key drivers? As we know, they are all intersected. Next, please. So, what does that mean when you have these key drivers, and what does that do to the country or to the community? At present, we know that the pandemic has tested us all in more ways than we could mention. It's also reminded us of how fragile human life is. It had led to so many members and lives and livelihood being lost. Right now, what we are seeing as a result of these key drivers is that people are going into extreme poverty. The number of people who are using food banks since 2010 has gone from the tens of thousands to millions. The picture that you see in front of you are the community leaders who are there at the forefront of responding to the pandemic, leaving so many marginalized communities behind with nothing to put on the table unless we take an action on it. And I would like to draw a particular attention to the gentleman at the back with the grey hair. That's the former leader of the Labour Party. He comes there every single week to serve the community, to pack food parcels and food, just like every other person who goes. Service, we are all servants of God, and in the eyes of the Almighty, or the divine, as you call it, we are all equal. In moments of need, we are all compelled to respond. What we are also seeing is that level of poverty is leading to other things. The level of food insecurity amongst the highest in Europe. For me, it saddens me that a country which is amongst the wealthiest in the world is actually suffering from food poverty. We are talking about 8.4 million people struggling to get enough food to eat. And unless food banks or mutual aids are there to support, nobody else will. We must ask ourselves, what is going on? Next slide, please. Food poverty, food insecurity is not the only outcome of these key drivers. We are also seeing a real increase in gang and knife crime. In January and February alone, in the area where I live, 5 people were killed. The youngest perpetrator was 11 years of age, who appeared in the Crown Court a couple of weeks ago. There is not a moment that goes by where I do not ask myself, what is going on in the mind and in the heart of any individual as young as that might lead them to take a knife? Many of our politicians' response to the London riot in the past was that whilst they condemn what's taken place, they also saw that as a cry for help. Let's think about what that means. Many young people are saying that yes, their voice matters, but Nobody is listening. We're talking about young people, but we are not talking to them. What happens when that conversation is not happening with them? Ask yourself that question. Next slide, please. Child poverty is also on the rise. 47.5% of children in Islington, which is in the north of London, where I live, are living in severe poverty. Families are either getting supported by their neighbours or by food bank or elsewhere. Those who lost their jobs have nothing else to rely on anymore. This is putting them in a very compromising situation. In areas where I work, the division between the rich and the poor is ever so widening. Inequality in the UK is ever so widening. That is also leading people to be mentally unstable. Already, with all that we carry, whether it's trauma that's never been transformed and that is being transferred, whether it's because of the impact of a direct experience which had led us to being mentally unstable, that is also on the rise. 1 in 4 people experience mental health. That's 792 million people affected worldwide. So whilst I am addressing the issues happening in the United Kingdom, this is a global issue. What happens here affects the world, and I'm very conscious of that. Next, please. So the question is, how are we, from the context of Initiative of Change through the Sustainable Communities Programme, responding to? So this is how we're doing. At present, our focus is on an immediate response. Where there's a need, we respond. There's no time to wait. When you're working with grassroots, community, that's the only way forward. It cannot just be done through dialogue. Dialogue is not the end to the means. We have to complement with something else. So these are some of the key areas we focus on at the moment. Mental health and youth empowerment. That's to respond to the rise of mental health, especially engaging with young people on the ground. Bridging divide through music is a new initiative that has been developed just a couple of months ago, because we know that where words fail, music speaks. We've also seen in the world stage where many artists, musicians, recently in the election of in the States, where prominent musicians had come to convey the message of unity through music. And the inspiration of this particular initiative is that with also carry on the legacy of Initiative of Change, where in the 1960s and 70s, people used to travel across the world and use music as a way to build bridges across the divide. Through that, we're also complementing that through training with migrants, refugees, and hosts. We know that the disconnection and disunity is coming from a place of fear. Whilst we do live in a very diverse communities, and even I would say in a diverse city such as London, you will be very surprised of how many communities are living in silos and how many people do not know who their next door neighbors are. So these training facilitates a platform, what that means in practice, to be showing multiculturalism and diversity. Building trust between police and youth, that is to respond to the high level of crime and mistrust that exists between young people, are often being framed, stopped and searched, and where police are using their positions and power to not only for young people, they would say, manipulate their mind, but also to really be or come from a place of authority where there is no space to listen. You are immediately judged, and that is causing a lot of hostility in our communities. Interfaith and intercultural dialogue, whilst we are culturally and faith-wise also very well connected in many ways, there are still division amongst different faiths. And for me, I'm particularly conscious because of somebody who is of a particular faith, who's on the limelight for all the wrong reasons. I feel that there's a sense of urgency to build that bridge. So we do that through training, through being on the ground, and through using tools of mediation, communication, conflict resolution, walking alongside people. And the last one, which you've already seen in the previous slide, food poverty and mutual aid is also used to serve and to bring divided communities. Because we know that when communities are divided because of economic reasons or racial divisions, that by providing the very thing that brings them together around the table, that in itself is a powerful way of bringing about a deep sense of connection and a common mind. Next, please. So for those of you who are asking the obvious question of how do we do this? Our vision and our aims are on the principle that this has to be and must be from a bottom up. The grassroots know where those needs are. They're the ones who are hurting. They're the ones who are experiencing. So what does that mean in practice? It means for us to go out there into the communities, to live into the life of others, that it naturally and immediately, not immediately, but naturally removes some of the fears where you go into their comfort zone rather than to try and bring to where they are. Whilst the bottom-up approach is fundamental to the engagement through an outreach approach, the top-down is equally one to be very mindful of and to work with in order to balance that. So we need to work with our politicians. We need to work with other senior stakeholders, because at the top, how on earth are we to create policies around needs and not fear if we are not communicating with people on top? What we've done over the past is, instead of going to their base, which we have been invited to do so, is pull them to our base and say, unless you're happy to bring to where we are, we're not happy to collaborate in that sense. And it's also very enriching and enlightening for them to be able to live into the life of the community and to see things how they are, and to be able to experience it from a much more human level, and to be able to take off that hat of authority that sometimes can be quite intimidating for so many people because of a negative encounter. So on the outreach level, we do need assessment, we work alongside people, we build trust through giving ownership and power to the communities, because it's their community. Before it can become ours, is theirs. We do that through accompaniment and mentoring. So that's mentoring the young people, the grassroots, but also mentoring our stakeholders, our politicians, our community practitioners, our faith leaders, so that we are also starting from an equal path and co-creating some of the visions ahead. And that, of course, naturally leads us to the trust building trainings. And we do that again across the different stakeholders, where we are able to recognize that those problems are collective problems, but we also need to find collective solutions. And collective solution cannot be found on the basis of blaming each other. So it also enables us to remove that place of blame, but to be in a place and a position of finding solution. Next. So I now leave you with this quote, which always gives me a sense of hope in times of despair, when I just feel that all is far too much and I can't cope because there's distractions left, right, and center. I know I'm very conscious that many people might not be people of faith, and that's okay. And my faith recognizes that and is reminding us in many verses in the Quran. I have made you into man and woman, divided you into nations and tribes to identify yourself well with one another. Lakum dinakum walidin. Arabic, again in the Quran, you have your religion and I have mine. So I or nobody of faith is in a position of judging the other. And also that's very important in the context of today's conversation and reaching out, moving from confrontation to collaboration. So indeed, Allah will not change the condition of the people until they change what is in themselves. When I forget that I've had enough, I'm too tired, I'm waiting somebody else to do the job, this verse from the Quran always comes to my mind. And then it compels me to step up, to be bold, to be brave. What we need is serious, radical change from the top, systematic change. We need to make sacrifice, solidarity, not just for today because of the pandemic, but solidarity always, collaboration and connection across the aisle, irrespective of our belief or faith or none, and collaboration also with stakeholders who seem to not feel too comfortable to reach out and to connect with us. I think about resilience a lot in moments like this. Resilience is not what happens to you, it's how you react to the situation and recover from what happens to you. Resilience is knowing that you are the only one that has the power and the responsibility to pick up yourself so that you're able to pick up someone else. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Amina, for this powerful and inspiring contribution. Let's take a moment in silence to reflect on what Amina shared with us and on whether we are contributing in any way to building bridges or walls in our communities. Please let me remind you to put your comments or questions in the chat. Now, it is also my pleasure to introduce our next speakers, Imam Muhammad Ashafa and Pastor James Wee from Nigeria. Previously bitter enemies who held guns against each other, but turned into mediators peace ambassadors, and best friends. When I first met the Imam and the pastor, I was impressed by the fun and humorous dynamic between them. I personally couldn't believe that they almost killed each other in a battlefield. Pastor James lost his hand while fighting Muslims, and Imam Ashafa lost loved ones while fighting Christians. They too, however, learned the hard way that there's no way to peace, but peace is the way. The story and work of the Imam and the pastor are well captured in the documentary films, The Imam and the Pastor and An African Answer. Their work today as peace ambassadors addresses a key issue facing people of faith. How do we cooperate and build bridges without compromising our fundamental religious principles? Their approach has brought peace to religiously divided groups in several Nigerian states and beyond. They join us today from Kenya, where they have been invited to help address some ethnic and religious rivalries between communities that have caused civil and political strife. They have also worked to mitigate conflict in Iraq, Sudan, Sri Lanka, Libya, and Ethiopia, only to name a few. Over to you, Pastor James and Imam Ashafa.
Well, peace be with you all, and to all the people all over the world. We say peace be with you.
We simply means in my tradition, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Today is an important day again for us, traveling some 300 to 400 kilometers, probably about 250 miles, to join you today in the city of Nairobi, where we have gone to discuss healing from confrontation to collaboration. In the city of Garissa, where in 2015, over 148 students were killed by religious motivated or political religious motivated violence in cool blood. We are happy today that our engagement there, just as always, has catalyzed for a lot of change, which we are sure will bring the kind of healing and address issues of trauma that have taken the whole city. So we're happy to be here.
And when we talk about our experiences or our journey of life in terms of how are we able to move from confrontation to collaboration and cooperation. One important thing is about me personally, a little about my life. My childhood has a different set. My youthfulness age and the age of maturity. There are three important components of my life. In my childhood, I was in search of what? In search of my identity. What identity do I possess? Looking at my community, how does that a monolithic community influence my thought for a global community? What do I see in others who doesn't look like me, who doesn't share the same culture, the same tradition, or even the same belief system? How do we see them? As a child, it was a learning process where I just engage, I see what others see. At that point, I live in a community that have a lot of unhealed memory of the past, historical perceived injustices. So most of those unhealed conflict, Amina was saying, a conflict not transformed is transferred. Our family have transferred those unhealed memory, those hate they have against the other into us as innocent children. And my childhood, I pick on most of this. I have a hate so much for the others, especially the Christian in my community, so who live outside the box. And when I got to my youthful age, it's about the fear of the others become relevant. And we move to a more monolithic culture. Fear engaging is the fear of losing my identity, my state of mind, what I am, what I stand for, what I represent. And when you look at that important phenomena at youthful age, is the age of action. I want action to take an action to take an action. So those important elements that lead are the drivers. Some of these important drivers, in my own case, the clever of cultural infiltration, instead of cultural integration, I was looking at cultural assimilation. Everybody have to be like me in order to be accepted. And the second important component is the issue of inferiority or superiority of complex. Who are we? We are the best, they are inferior, they have to go down, we have to be on top, etc., etc. And finally, religious and ethnic bigotry. Religious and ethnic bigotry, where people will become so much irrational or overwhelmed with our own state of mind and seeing nothing positive in the other. Of course, you can talk of political exclusion among others. These are some of the important drivers before I got to what we call the age of maturity, where I have my turning point. And it led me to have a very strong extremist, militant opinion in my journey of life on how I relate with the others. It's just you are either right, you are right, you are wrong. That was the motivating factor. Pastor?
Yeah, well, if we go to my story, I also come from a minority group within a very strong political north, Kaduna in particular, where we came from. I grew up to sense a feeling of segregation, neglect, and at a point became quite strong about these things that we see, which is sometimes is owing to bad governance, political injustice, and rivalry. And that built me and strengthened my resolve to use other means other than the social civic means to address those differences. As the moderator has said, the anger and the pains, and also similarly, collective unhealed memory transferred to us by our parents and the narratives. And unfortunately too, contemporarily, those narratives seems to be playing either at a level not as escalated as before, or at some level in some instances perceived to be escalating. Those issues were those things that motivate my feeling of taking a very aggressive method of trying to address those perceived injustices and collaboration. I mean, and those things that has engaged us in the fighting. So, having said this, a little of the background, the issue for us today is what's happening.
When we talk about what is happening, is first and foremost, what is our turning point? Many people doesn't know how do we turn over from confrontation to this particular path we choose. I think that's another important point for us to see, because the language we have is the language of debate and not dialogue. In debate, you have to disgrace, you have to pull down syndrome, whereas in dialogue is opening a door for understanding the other, learning from his own. The second important thing is the issue of between confrontation and collaborations. Do we confront the others or do we collaborate with the others? Between a competitive world and a world where collaborations is the key important factor. It was a strong driving force, and we choose the path of competition, which gave birth to that debate, which gave birth to win and lose situations. And the outcome is, of course, as you heard, we talk about militancy and all those vices that goes in. Today, in which many of our youth, because we are programmed to hate and we move into action. But we all have our turning point, how we get there. Maybe Pastor will start talking about the turning point before we come to some of our interventions and what we are doing.
Well, that's true, Imam. Before we came to where we are today, about 26 years back, 27 now, we have fought negatively. We have induced constituencies and our peers to act differently. And in this acting differently, it means, if it means taking up arms to defend a position, you can go and do that. And there are scriptures in holy books that tends to induce or instigate violence, which we have used to promote. And at some point, from the books, like Amina was saying, some people may be full of faith or not. We are driven by our faith to do what we are doing. And we do not shy away from saying we are religious people committed. So the same instrument that we had used to instigate young people to violence, we went back to the text. And for me, my turning point was when I was invited to participate in a program aimed at evangelizing the northwestern Nigeria. And the leader who then recruited us is now late, is the founder of Family Worship Center in Abuja, said to me, James, you cannot preach Christ with the hate you have. And for 3 years, like I've always nursed the ambition of fighting or even taking the life of my colleague. But the power of change that came through the spirituality and the fact that I am a passionate person about wanting to make it to heaven, and I'm a passionate person about wanting to evangelize, the verse that came quite strongly for me in the Bible, which is Hebrew chapter 12, verse 14 and 15, that says that I should follow peace with all men and women, and add to that holiness, without which no man can see the Lord. The second verse says, do not allow the root of bitterness, your personal bitterness, to grow and affect others and make them come short of the glory of God. And if I will be responsible for not healing my wounds, and I share it with young people, I share with people, and they go out and fight and die, it means I'm responsible for their going into hell by the judgment of my scripture. So that power transformed me. That turning point came, and I came struggling horridly to see Imam after tormenting myself for 3 years of not seeing the ambition to kill Imam. But I'm glad that from that same point I had my challenge, instigation, I got inspiration for collaboration instead of confrontation. Imam.
And I think that the same thing goes to me, but from a different perspective. That day, as a youth who is still angry and trying to be a force for confrontation, I went to the mosque and I met the Imam. And on this was on Friday, and the Imam was talking about the power of forgiveness as the weapon to turn the enemy into the best of a friend. And he said in Islam, if you do not possess the spirit of forgiveness, as laid down in the Quran, as practiced by Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then you can never be true Muslims. And that was the motivating factor to say, how can I love the enemy? He says, Muhammad did it in Mecca, Muhammad did it in Medina, Muhammad did it in Taif. You have to find a way to let go those pain that you have encountered as a result of confrontation you have with the other, or you intend to have with the other who has hurt you. And that was the beginning of the journey. And for me, I believe that when I did that journey, the concept, I start seeing there are two important scriptural misrepresentation. There's a lot of misinterpretation and misrepresentation of the scripture by the incapable and mischievous religious leaders. We have incapable religious leaders, they are the fatwas on the Google. You go to Google, you see a lot of fatwas. Anything is evil, and and then you find the mischievous who know what is right, but misrepresentation and misinterpretation of text to meet their selfish greed. And that, when I got this sheikh who put me through during the khutbah of Jummah, I asked him, say, somebody has killed my parents, he killed my cousins, they killed our teacher, should we forgive them? He said, yes, you have to forgive them. And only until you do that, you become true to your traditions. And that was the driving motivation to say, in Islam, you have to collaborate with everybody who work for good. Collaboration in the part of doing good, cooperation in the part of goodness is one element that a Muslim must possess. So, and that was what motivated me into action. And with that spirit, I was able to say, yes, now I can see the value in collaboration as Muhammad has did in his own time. And as a Muslim, I need to live with that spirit of forgiveness, without which Al-Jannah, I'm far from the rahmah of Allah.
Very time constraining. However, what is the situation now? The situation now in our country and also Africa is that we are confronted daily with killings, kidnapping, ransom, challenge, like in particular large country like Nigeria, where we have over 214 million at the moment. There is the North-South challenge. There is the issues of bandits. There are issues of terrorism in some part of the country. You are trying to heal the rift. There are certain pronouncements by some people that tend to aggravate the situation, and we are daily confronted with trying to address these things, and hence we started working pragmatically to do both dealing with those perceived people that are being gradually stigmatized, to begin to say, how do we have an inclusive narrative?
And that is the most difficult one, because some people have the fear, say, we cannot live with them, we cannot work together, how can we? And or the feeling of sense of we cannot relate with them. We started some initiatives which are very, very important in terms of building bridges of collaboration and cooperations. As earlier stated, you can see that one of the important things is getting to the youth. The youth are more militant, more aggressive. And one of our programs is getting youth, those in schools and youth out of schools. Because in Africa, you see many youth who couldn't go back to university, they couldn't go back to school, and they formed themselves into sort of a big bomb on the ground. They are foot soldiers for violent destruction. We have a strong network for the youth in our community who have been working.
And we're also confronted by the challenges of COVID-19, where because of this insecurity, there will be food shortages. Even personally, I have a farm, and for 4 years now, I've not been able to go to the farm. Now, this is for me. And there are many people who live on those farms, peasant farmers that live daily on this food. They are sacked from their villages. That is one major one. Number two, also.
They are sacked because of the Boko Haram and because of the what?
Because of the armed banditries and kidnapping for ransom. Even as poor as people are in the villages, they are also kidnapped for as little as maybe, I can say, 20 pounds or yes, 30 pounds. They are asked to pay to ransom themselves. So it is aggravating the situation, and that we are confronted. And how to do it, the youth were one. We are beginning to talk with indigenous youth. What we're saying, like in Southern Kaduna, we are bringing the community Hausa and Fulani, and also the local other languages that are non-Fulani and non-Hausa, to talk among themselves as youths to see the way forward. This is one of the pragmatic things. But whatever we do, we superimpose it on our faith, because Nigerians are very religious, and we are working on that strength to get people transformed.
And I think one important thing is the issue of working with the women groups. Right now, women as the mother of the nation, we are working with the women, helping the women to be a voice, because every child has a respect for a mother. He believes he has a mother somewhere, a sister somewhere else. And most of those guys into militancy, saying, if your sister is supposed to be the victim, how do you feel? If your mom is the victim, how do you feel? We need to have it. Say, but they don't look like us, and we let them to see, and we are building these processes, and that helps our women to see what, as a girl child, the protection she needed, to work as a team, raise the voices of our women so that they can be able to. We have a Women of Peace Interfaith Network across the country, and that has helped us a lot.
Yes, women as mothers. And then we went back to our constituency of religious leaders. How do you use the pulpit? How do you use the membry to do sermons and khutbah to be an inclusive one? And teaching also and eliciting and provoking them to using inclusive theology of communication, the communication that do not do harm. If there is any words that even by coincidence your faith say, call the people that are not your people with that name, what other name that the book say you should call them? Use those non-aggressive terms. So it's beginning to work, and there is inclusion. Religious leaders are beginning to come together to talk about COVID-19 and issues like that. Imam and I also are working on a protocol of a book for religious leaders in addressing the pandemic and other epidemics and other challenges, security from the faith perspectives. And it's quite instructive, and it's quite revealing, and it's like getting people from what we have tested. We have worked also with the military on how do the military engage. That is another thing. Recently, about 2 weeks back, or less than 2 weeks back, we were in the military formation where the middle level leaders are trained to say, these are the roles of religious leaders in conflict management and mitigation, which we have engineered them to begin to participate.
And I think one important thing is that it's very difficult when you do with religion on the khutbah. Many have the perception of compromising. For you to collaborate or to cooperate, you have to compromise, you have to give out, you don't need to cooperate, you don't need to collab, you don't need to compromise anything for you to work together with the other persons. You need to hold on to your value system, he hold on to his value system, you hold to your own culture, he holds to his own culture. I just borrow one of the words from Rumi, which Rumi is as a Sufi sheikh, philosopher. He's translating the Quran chapter 49 verse 13, which Amina quoted earlier at the beginning of her statement, where he's saying, indeed we created you male and female and made you into nations and tribes, given colors and race, so that all of you may be what? Identity, to be able to identify yourself and potentials you have together. And that's why Muhammad said, no Arab. Remember, no Arab is superior to a white, neither is a white superior to a black, nor is a black superior to any other person. They are all one, children of one person, Adam and Eve. So in that particular element, I remember one keyword in terms of what is right and what is wrong. We are not talking about what is right, but what is wrong. We are talking about the common good of humanity altogether, what bound us together. As initiative will say, the brotherhood, the fraternity of the human family is the most important factor. So the Sufi Rumi was saying, unquote, between what is right and what is wrong, there is an open garden. We shall let's meet there. And I say, we need to meet at the open garden where there is no right or wrong, but the goal is to collaborate, to cooperate in order to promote and revive the dignity of humanity that is sinking deep, nose-driven into
into hell, but we want to be in heaven. You see, that same verse that Imam quoted is actually found in the Bible, the same. In Acts of Apostles chapter 17, verse 26 says, and we made you from one common origin, one source of one blood, and all nations of men to settle on the face of the earth, having definitely determined their allotment period of time and fixed bond, areas of their habitation and their settlements and abodes. You see, the two faiths say we are one. And so we need to collaborate as one people and one humanity and to address common challenges. And this is what we are trying to say here. But to do this, we need to go into our rooms. Imam will usually say, let's go to the house of Hagar and the house of Sarah. And that is to do intra-religious dialogue. Let's heal ourselves before we now collaborate. There are issues that we need to heal within our faiths, and we encourage the world, leaders listening to us, sit down within the Christian faith, deal with your issues. Sit down within the Muslim, deal with the issues. Those hardcore, those scriptures that even radicalize, how do we present them? How do we begin to work together? Then we can come together as a team to, after confrontation, we do collaboration and cooperation. And this for us is a strategy that is gaining ground. And anywhere we go, even in Garissa, we did that and it brought healing. And the community's young girls, the president of a university in Garissa is a Muslim girl. I was so surprised that in Kenya, in Garissa in Kenya, a Muslim is giving presidency of the whole student union. It is really a revelation and it is a revolution. And we think this revolution should continue. No collaboration without understanding. We have to understand to collaborate.
With this, I will say thank you very much for giving us this opportunity so that we'll have more time for questions and answers so that we'll be able to respond to some of the difficult issues that make cooperation a very challenging moment. In our journey, during question and answer, we can respond to some of those. What makes cooperation, what are the pull and push factors that make cooperation a very difficult one? Thank you very much as you listen, Pastor.
And I think for all those, you're already generating your questions. Amina, Ashafa, and Jay. AJJ are listening. I will be happy to address whatever you say. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm sure that I'll be talking in the name of everybody when I say we're really grateful for your insightful sharing and the inspiration that you bring. Thank you so much. Let's also take another minute of quiet to reflect on what Pastor James and Imam Ashafa shared, and then we will go to the second part. Thank you again for being with us, everybody. Before we go to the Q&A part, we're gonna split into breakout rooms for 5 people in each room. And we would like to like you to think about a question and share within your subgroups in the breakout room, which is, what divisions are calling for my attention in my community? And do I contribute to building bridges or walls? So this is going to be a breakout room discussion. The question, you can find it in the chat. And Olga will
yes, so breakout rooms will start now.
Question from Mike Smith, and it says, what is Amina's vision for the contribution that the media at its best can make to the world? Frank Bookman saw the media as the heralds of a new world order. Today, we are the most informed generation in history, thanks to the impact of the global media. So this is to you, Amina.
Thank you, Mike, for your question. I think the role of the media is a powerful one, because we can use the media to connect, to engage, to inspire, and to grow a global audience that no one else can reach other than them. But currently, the way that the media is engaging, that's the problem. Having said that, coming back to Frank Bookman and how he used the media, I think it's really important for me on a personal level. I feel that it's really important to engage in the media, to change those narratives, to use the media as a platform for a force of good, to be able to convey the message that we are conveying in this virtual platform today, to be able to say, hey, actually our narrative and our vision for the world is very different to the one that is being painted. It was only very recently, actually a couple of weeks ago, where at IFC we've held an event which is part of our annual event in celebration of International Women's Day. And it was a series of events touching on some very topical issues: domestic violence, youth activism, food poverty, migration, which is gonna come up more and more now. Now, what I have done personally is to write to a couple of media outlets and say, this is what we're doing, and we want to send that message across, to be able to say that, you know, in the midst of darkness and despair, there is amazing things happening. And as a result of that, actually, that an article has been written of the fantastic work that's been put together by the team. And at the same time, that it was advertised more widely for us. So it's also our responsibility. So it comes back to the self and how we can use the media as a force of good rather than the one that we are seeing right now. But that requires to build a relationship that is authentic and balanced, so that it's us and them that are gaining from that. So it becomes a we. It doesn't come from a place of, you know, it's you and then we are here. It is us as a collective that we will change the current narrative that is dividing our communities, that is creating fear, that is disconnecting people. And we want to show a different kind of narrative, one that is real, one that is so deeply needed now, one that is hopeful, and one that is strong. And that's where the message of IFC and its work also really plays such a key role. We have a message to the world, and we mustn't shy away of what that message is, but then convey that message in a collective and authentic way, I would say. I hope that answers to your question.
Thank you, Amina. I hope this was satisfying to you, Mike, and I'm sorry, we were supposed to use that chat, but now I know that that chat is disabled. So we have Yabo raising his hand. Maybe you can unmute yourself and voice your question, please.
Yeah, thank you very much for this program and this presentation. My name is Yabo Ogunjuno of Taking On Men Brother, a peace advocacy that seeks to promote interfaith and international intercultural relations in Nigeria. I got information about this program very late, else I would have mobilized our youth. Moreover, I'm not in Nigeria right now, I'm in Canada. I will be very happy if we can get a link where we can get, where I can get this program when I get back home, so I can use it for our youths and use it to enlighten them. They need to hear this. And so I'm interested in having a link or video or whatever we can of this program. It's too educative. I don't want us to miss the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's what I want to say.
We will make sure that you'll get resources after the session, either in a follow-up email or here. I hope this would help.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
The next question is, or the next hand that was raised is Ken Noble. Can you please, yes, unmute yourself, and we're ready to hear you.
Sorry, I was just trying to point out that the chat wasn't working, so I've withdrawn my hand.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. And then we will move to Randa Farhat.
Yes, hello everybody. First of all, I would like to say thank you so much. We are so grateful for the speakers today. Imam and James, and Pastor, we have been working a lot on your videos, and you have very admirers among us in Lebanon. So thank you so much for being here. I have two questions, one for Imam and Pastor, and the other is for, I'm sorry, Omnia. Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, so is there...
We can't hear you, Randa. You're breaking, your voice is breaking.
Is there something, yeah?
No. Would you write the question in the chat? It is enabled now.
Hello,
and we
can you hear me now?
No.
Okay.
Please, thank you. Thanks. So the chat is now available for use, everybody. And if you have any question, please feel free to write it there. In the meantime, there's a question, a raised hand from Najwa Namour. Najwa.
Hello, thank you everyone for being here. I have a question for the Imam and Pastor. As Randa said, we very much admire you. We've been studying your work in the trust circles that is now taking place in Lebanon through Initiatives of Change Lebanon. You said in the movie that the Imam, I'm sorry, we have seen you building bridges and mediating peace between divided communities after the end of a certain conflict. How to practically, between quotations, practically do that in places where the conflict is still ongoing, like what's happening right now in my country, Lebanon?
You're muted, Pastor.
Can she repeat the question again, please?
Okay, in the movie, we have seen you building bridges and mediating peace between divided communities, after the conflict has already ended. My question is, because we want to learn from you, how to practically do this building of bridges between communities where the conflict is still ongoing, it's not over yet. And my question is inspired from the state we are living currently in Lebanon. So are there like practical solutions or strategies that you can help us with from your experience?
Well, thank you, Najwa. Your questions are quite pragmatic. It's good for a class, but we'll make some attempt to respond to a few practical ones. Amina has talked about media engagement. We have in our center monthly peace journalism meeting where media people come, discuss issues about themselves, try to work out how they can be sending out information. In short, it came to a point that the journalists will be interviewing journalists on how to be inclusive, on how to send information. So the media must be your friends. You must come together from time to time. And we also have an ongoing conflict. So we are using the media. One, we're also meeting regularly with religious leaders to begin to look at difficult texts. Difficult texts are texts that are open to manipulation and misinterpretation. What will you say about this text? Then we have a group of people who are victims of kidnapping. And I have on a list within Kaduna region alone, over 260 women have been raped. What do we have for them? We are doing psychosocial counseling, and we are still collecting the names of those women. Some will not want to tell you, and in other states, but this is just Kaduna, about 260 women and girls raped by kidnappers and abductors. So what do? You continue to engage them. Please forgiveness, and also have certain tips for them to know how to use what we call the early warning and early response. If you see an indication of violence, say it out quickly. Then who do you say it to? Who will take the action? That is another thing for another class. I do hope that we'll have time to do that more practically.
And then in addition to what the pastor have said, there's a document we call reflective structured dialogue. Reflective structured dialogue. We have that electronically.
They have it.
And we believe that you have it there at IFC. They can give it to you from IFC. You can have that.
Roy has it, or Olga.
Olga will have it, or the other, and they can give you that material. One important thing you do is, whenever you are engaging communities in conflict situation at the beginning, one thing you do, you don't go to say we come to make peace. Say we come to discuss social issue of common concern. And in identifying social issues that connect the two communities together, then you look for what you call connectors. Don't go for disconnectors. Go for connectors. People who believe they are more liberal and they have something in common to share. Bring them together, and at the same time, You identify the third level, who I would call the shadows. Those who are behind the scene, very strong, but they have the remote control of the community in their hearts. When they are hard to be part of the process, that you are bringing issue of common concern. When you have a team on issue of common concern, and you identify connectors and bring them together, when they start discussing those issues, don't raise the issue of the conflict itself. Discuss issues that are human issues, human angle, and before you know what is happening, they themselves, when they're discussing some of these key issues, and they find solution to that. But get our training manual on the Polarization dialogue and began that issues of cooperation, issue of collaboration that bring people together, and identify thematic, either it is the youth groups, either it is the women group, either it is the community or religious groups. You don't need to be religious to engage in these processes. Especially when you're don't deal with theological issues, because it's not an area that perhaps you would love to engage, but engage in issue of common concern. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think Amina has something to add. Unmute yourself first, Amina, please.
Thank you, Ruwaida, for picking up on that. Now, I was just listening to Imam Shafa. Whilst I agree with you in connecting to those that you connect with, I think it's important. It's even more important, and I'm becoming more and more conscious aware of being connecting to the ones that don't want to connect. It's very easy to get those of us who agree with our views, our vision, and even our judgment and misconception about things and the world itself. But those who don't agree with us are the ones that are very hard to bring around the table, whether it's around the physical table, virtual table. So actually, myself and members of the core team have specifically been focusing on connecting with the disconnector to ensure that we are creating a space for dialogue that goes beyond the boundaries of the converted. The converted are not the ones we worried about, it's the ones who are not willing to listen, who are not willing to shift their mindset and to challenge them, but in a more constructive way that is not from a place of blame, but from a place of listening to one another and to really hear what are the hurts. What are some of the hurts? What is causing that division? What is causing, for instance, my neighbor who's been living next door to my house for the last 20 years not come and say hello? What is that thing is causing a parent to take their children out of a particular school and to take into another one? I know that for the mere factor that I represent a faith that is on the limelight for all the wrong reasons. Apologies, 1 second. I am so sorry. My fire alarm has just gone off. But
it's okay.
My ultimate point is that it's who are we talking to and why, and the disconnector are actually the ones that we need to connect. That's in my view is the hardest job in the world, and who am I even to say that, because the wisdom and the experience and the know-how comes from the likes of yourself, Imam Shafa, and Pastor James, who have been carrying this work. And I'm a beginner in many ways, but I feel that there's a sense of urgency to connect to the disconnector.
Thank you, Amina, for your contribution. I hope the fire alarm is not serious. You're still with us, right? So next we have a question from Julia Kobrich. Forgive me if I'm pronouncing any name incorrectly. Julia, would you like to voice your question?
Sorry, I didn't find the button. Yes, my question is, I would like to learn more about the intra-religious work that you, Imam, Ashafa, and Pastor, you do before you start engaging people into religious dialogues. What is it that you're focusing on? What is the work about that you do within each of the groups?
Well, very importantly, as we said, if you are entering a community that is sharply divided, a community in conflict, and very often, if you are not a mediator, professional mediator invited by the government, you are coming indirectly into that institution, then you have to follow a processes, which says that initially you come with a process of complementing various efforts. And that's why when we talk about the process of identifying issues of common concern and discuss around it, you are just searching for the ground. And then from there, your goal is to move to the core issues. From that first process, it leads to the second process. And that's why we say in another process, you identify the key actors. These key actors, including those we call the shadows, who hide behind the scene. They are major disconnectors, and they chat with the life, they gamble with the life of their communities, because the community so much trust them. They see them as kings. So for you to be able to get to those people, you need to start engaging with those people at that level. But at the first meeting, if you bring all these disconnectors together, they will mess up the process of peace for you. And that's why they come at the second level and they go to the third level before you start bringing them one by one and you get them engaged. And before you know it, you have created enough doubt to say confrontation gave birth to threat and self-destruction, whereas cooperation gave birth to opportunities and development. These are processes that we go through.
And sometimes you need to take them to analysis on the cost of conflict and to see what conflict can cause to their society. However, we strongly recommend that you look out for that book, Reflective Structured Dialogue. It gives you step by step how to engage in communities. And if you have further questions, we are happy to respond to that. And to the brother from the High Commission in South Africa, Bala, at the end of this program, I think we still have your number. We'll be able to connect with you. And to Don De Silva and the wonderful question that have been asked about homogeneous society like Somalia, and that our sister Amina should respond to that. But I think Imam also have been to Somalia, where he went to start dialogue together with Hassan from IOC in Sweden. They went to Somalia and started a dialogue, but I'm sure there is a need to go back there again when the bullets stop flying. But we think there's a need to go back to Somalia and re-engage those people so that more of talking about the texts within one faith, one people. He has just quoted that an Arab is not superior to an African or a white man. We are all one. There are various tools that we can use in a homogeneous society where they are all one faith and really get strong and get them going and doing a rethinking. I think all of us in IOC should begin to focus also our strength on Somalia and other communities in northern Nigeria that are just exclusively one faith, or even in southern Nigeria that are exclusively one faith, to look about confrontation, from confrontation to collaboration.
Thank you. Thank you. We're running out of time. It is exactly 90 minutes now, but I'm going to go for one more question from Celia. Celia, can you, she wants to ask a question to Amina.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, sure. I'm just going to read what I wrote. It's a question that arose from your last intervention, Amina. I was asking, how do you bring the disconnectors, those you call disconnectors, to the table? Are there some arguments or narratives that, in your experience, have worked to convince them to come and discuss? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And that's a brilliant question. And I thank you, because that question also allows me to share with you an experience that was really a life-changing experience. So talking about the disconnector, in the UK, for instance, the Prevent scheme, which is the Prevent strategy, the government's strategy, which is about safeguarding and supporting those vulnerable against radicalization, has been highly debated at every possible level. The strategy, which for many, especially for the Muslim community, is far from a strategy. It doesn't prevent. It almost alienates the Muslim community, and that has been the experience across the UK, and I'm sure in many parts of the world. I had an encounter with the head of Prevent just over 2 years ago almost. And I remember ending up in his office. It started from a place of, we've introduced the Prevent strategy in order to safeguard and prevent radicalization. But we also notice that the Muslim community aren't forthcoming, and we need to try and engage with them. What can you do? I was angry, I was distressed, but in that moment, my immediate reaction was, I need to give up my justifiable right to what I'm feeling, and I need to take this as an opportunity. I remember in the middle of a conversation, the head of Prevent, I stopped him and I said, right, if you want engagement, it has to come from a place of mutual ground. Before we go any further with this conversation, let me tell you a little bit of myself, where I come from and how I got to be where I am in terms of engaging in the issues that I am engaging, which also brought me to your table. Because alongside him, there was another officer who was scanning me from top to bottom. I do not remember the last time I felt that uncomfortable. Somehow, I had to find the strength within me to focus and to articulate and to send my message across and to use that as an opportunity. We had the longest pause in that moment when I stopped him. And that pause was a pause of reflection for him, what it meant to hear my story, my encounter with the Prevent strategy, what I think of it, how the community are experiencing. Fast forward, he then invited me to invite community and other stakeholders to City Hall to have a dialogue. I immediately refused. My response was, you want to engage? Let's engage on their level. So we're going back to the grassroots. How about this? I'm going to invite you to come with me on the ground to see these people, to be in their space, and to engage in a dialogue. Upon the acceptance of that invitation, it had opened up so many opportunities for deeper and meaningful conversation for the first time. And he did say that openly. He said, for the first time, he really felt that it was a two-way conversation where he was being listened to, but equally that he needed to do a lot of listening and learning. Fast forward, that meeting led to building a relationship beyond the hat of authority, of me being the grassroots leader and him being the head of Prevent, but establishing a relationship that was working towards collaboration. That actually, I later invited him to come with a delegation from the Sustainable Communities Program to CO. For those who don't know Co. That's our headquarters in Switzerland at the Palace, where we hold all our international conferences during the summer periods, and to attend with us one of the conferences towards an inclusive peace, and to engage in that broader context within the framework, and then build a relationship beyond the local community. That was the power of what it means to engage with the disconnectors. That's not to say that it's totally resolved, but what I am saying is that we have definitely moved from a place of confrontation to an authentic collaboration that opened up doors and opportunities, but most importantly, opened heart to receive and to engage from a place of mutual respect and understanding.
Thank you, Amina. Regretfully, we'll have to bring this session to an end, but we are really grateful for you of joining us today. And a special thanks, of course, to our speakers, Amina, Imam Ashafa, Pastor James. You will receive in the follow-up email, we will include a form or a survey to capture all these questions and pass them to our speakers. Certainly not enough time to address all the questions. I personally had a few and we couldn't catch on them. So our teams are actively trying to adjust to the current circumstances, and our trust building work is more important than ever before. The international team is working across multiple time zones to keep our network connected. Yet in order to continue to respond to the needs of our communities, donations are urgently needed. So we are grateful for your participation in today's conversation and hope that you got a lot out of it. Take care and keep in touch. You will again receive an email with an opportunity for feedback later today and resources and maybe the follow-up form that we talked about. And please keep your enthusiasm for our next episode in the series. We will keep you posted on our next event. Thank you so much for attending today. Have a nice day.